Good morning, guys. So we're out here at the forge. We're getting it fired up. We're letting some coke build up. The project we're going to be working on today is a flint and steel striker. So to make the striker, you have a couple of options. What I'm going to use is, and again, you got to think what you're looking to do. I'm going to use a small file, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to break this edge off right here. And we're going to use this as this part that's actually going to use as the striker. This end, we're going to round that out, bend it over, maybe put a twist in it, and make it look nice. So I don't want anything real big. I've made strikers in the past. I want this though for my belt pouch, so we want to keep this somewhat on the smaller end. So we'll get that started. Just going to let the video run and keep working with it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to break this end off. So all we have to really do, get that in the forge and get it heated up. Hopefully the rain's going to hold out. We have a little bit of rain here in Pennsylvania today, and like I said in my introductory video, I'm in the process of putting a forge up that would have a roof, and it's going to be a little bit more in the back country on the new property that we're getting. So as for now, I'm going to have to work in the rain a little bit today. Hopefully it holds out. It's been off and on most of the day today. One big thing that, as you can see, this stuff heats up real quick. So I'm just going to take this edge off, I'm going to bend it over. Just work that pretty hard on that one side. And then just remember when you're working with this stuff that you can always put it on the grinder when you're done. So alright, so we got that edge broken off. I'm going to throw it back in. I'm going to put it in the vise this time and finish that a little bit off. Now the thing with a forge like this, the way we have it set up, is that it gets extremely hot extremely quick. So if you're working with smaller pieces of metal, like this file, you just got to watch because it's going to get hot very quick. So in the vise too well. So get that edge heated back up. I'm just going to get it in there and square it off with the hammer then. Alright, so now we're going to flip it over and work this backside. So to do that, I'm going to decide how much area I want my striker to be. So for this sake, a little bit smaller than my thumb. So that's how I'm going to measure it once I get it back on there. Now again, because it's tapered and it's real thin, it's going to heat up real fast. So you just got to be careful with that. If you go too far, of course, you're going to melt your metal. always like to try to do with this is you want to get these files specifically good and hot and then start to work them down, because if you don't, you're going to bend them over, because it is a thinner file. You're going to bend it over and it's going to crack. So you really need to keep them hot while you're working with it, and try to do what you need to do with your metal with the least amount of hits. You don't want to just keep pounding it and pounding it and pounding it, because when you start doing that, you just start turning the metal to mush. So you want to keep as much of the integrity of the metal as possible. Starting to take that taper down. And again, if you have to work further in the middle of your piece and you have a taper, that end is going to get a lot hotter because it's smaller. Same as if you're building a fire out in the woods. You need, small sticks are going to catch first, so the small pieces of metal are going to heat up a lot quicker. As you can see, that's a lot different color orange than the rest of it. So if you're running in that situation, one option that you always have to do with that is, when you get your metal where you want it, dip it in water, that section, that end, and that'll cool that down. Now you don't want to constantly keep doing that. You can see we're starting to get there. I don't know, it's maybe against my chest. Starting to get that taper down a little bit more. Always want to check your piece to make sure if you're not overworking it so you don't start getting some cracks. So we're still on pretty good progress with this. I'm going to keep working this edge down, and then we'll move further into the piece. As you can see, I mean, that's really heating up. Alright, so as you can see, we're really starting to draw that out right now. So what I want to do is, this edge that's about as thick as I want it. So I'm going to work this a little bit down, and then I'm going to just cool with my water just that tip. So I don't have too much water, somebody dumped our bucket out. Alright, we're starting to get there, boys. Starting to get there. Alright, so you can see we're starting to get a nice long tail on that. Now of course it's not going to be that long, but I'd rather on the longer side so I have more area to work with. Like I said, you can always trim this stuff down or cut this down or chisel it off. Okay, so this is where we're at right now. See a pretty long tail on this? I'm actually going to reheat this back end here and cut this to the length I want. I'm just going to use a chisel and cut it once I heat it up. Cut down my file to length. Now it looks a little small, but again I want this striker for my belt kit, so I do want it on the smaller end. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to heat up this back side where I'm starting to draw it out, and I'm going to make that round, and then we're going to bend it over the Hornady anvil and put a little twist on the end, and it'll be pretty good. We'll do its final heating, and then if we need to hit it with the grinder at all, we will. Now I was actually saying if the last video cut it out or if I didn't even get it at all, I was at a gunmaker's fair. It's called Dixon's Gunmaker's Fair. It's in Kempton, PA. It's every year. I think this is the 32nd year. But I was talking to the blacksmith while I was there, and I said to him, sometimes I was running into the problem that my fire was hollowing out on the inside. So he said, well, keep a smaller fire, and when you are forging, constantly keep working your fresh coke into the fire. So I've been trying it, and I noticed a big difference today with how hot my pieces are getting and how much more control I have over the fire. So that's working pretty well. So okay, I rounded that out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it over. So I'm going to reheat that. Reheat that right at the curve. Place it over the horn and start working that. Again, like I said earlier in the video, you really don't want to let this get too cool when you're working with like on the files, because I guess steel is so hard it can break. It's okay if it twists a little bit, just flatten it out. Get it back on there. Keep working it. Starting to take some shape now, boys. Get that edge hot again. go. Starting to get there. 1 or 2 more heats only, hopefully. Like I said, a big thing I noticed is when I do this stuff, the less you have to work your metal, the better. So just think ahead a little bit. Think what you're doing. You should have no problem whatsoever finishing projects. Good. Okay, so here's where we're at right now with the striker. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take this end, I'm just curl that in a little bit, and then I'm going to cut it off. Actually, I think I'm going to bend this end back, and then bend the whole thing back on itself. So. Before I do that, I'm just going to grab a pair of vice grips I have here. Now, I'm going to show you guys in another video, I have a small toolkit that I take in some of our more long-term type camping scenarios. So I want to show you guys that in another video. There's not too many items you really need as far as to do this, even over a campfire. You don't always need a big forge like this to get most stuff done. Take this, start working that edge back again. Make sure you're keeping it hot when you're working this. You could feel, especially working with like something like this where I'm using pliers to bend, you could definitely feel when that metal, you don't need to push it any further. That should bend like you're bending a piece of spaghetti there. Flatten that out a little. Roll it some more. Coming out good, boys. At first I was a little bit, I never used a file this thin. I usually use more of a heavy file. I'll show you that in a second. Some of the files I used in the past size-wise. So I was a little hesitant when I first started with how nice we can come out, but starting to like it. Alright. Throw that in there, let that heat up just a little bit. I'm going to get it out, make sure it's good and flat. Like I said, them edges, they don't take long, so don't throw it in there and forget about it. Alright. Pretty good. Overall, a little bit. I'm going to put that whole thing in like I said. If you have small edges, excuse me. Use small edges like that sometimes. Cool them down if you're going to get that piece in the fire, because, man, that stuff will heat up quick. You'll burn it right off. Especially if you put a little bit of time into some of these projects, some of the stuff that takes a little bit longer to do. And if you look at it, if you're in a self-reliance type situation, you know, that's the last thing you want to do is ruin a piece of metal that's something you really needed. So, heating this up just to straighten it out. All right, boys. So that's where we're at now. What I've done with my strikers in the past is throw them on top of the fire. I let them get nice and red hot, and I throw them right in my water. That's going to make them real hard. Don't melt it off doing that. We'll get that fired up. Rain luckily held off. Like I said, you don't want to melt these. That's it. Alright guys, so we're going to let that cool now. I threw that in some water to get it good and hard. Probably take it to the grinder a little bit, just that front edge. You can always use a file too, just to clean it up a little bit. I usually like to touch it up with the grinder. It makes it look a little bit nicer. And then I'm going to get it out here, hit it with some flint, see how it works. Stay tuned. Alright boys, so here's my striker that I finish up now. Of course, I'm going to clean it up a little bit. It's a little rough around the edges, but for the most part, this thing, I just threw it in an Altoids tin. Fits perfect. It's a pretty thin profile. Now, I did say earlier, some of the other files I've used in the past, as you can see, they're a little bit thicker than something like this. Okay? But the only problem with them is if you're going to carry it around, it's tough to, you know, fit it in a small case or anything like that. So I did take my file and grind it off this edge here to make it a little bit smoother, and I am getting some nice sparks. Let's make sure you're on here. Should be able to see that. So I brought out a little bit of charred material that I made last night around the fire. See if we can get this thing lit. Flip it this way. There you go.